Namaste everyone. I'm Rahul Diwan and with me is Shankar Khandavalli. There are common questions that Hindus ask. I've been having conversations with Shankar. Today we do not have a conversation, but more an FAQ, which on questions that Shankar is going to answer. So please listen in. If you have more questions, please leave your comments in the comments box below in this video when you're watching, so that Shankar can answer these questions for you as well in the future videos. Thank you.
When we go about the Dharmic understanding of any system, any formal system, this is how I see it at 4 levels. In fact, Purusha Sukta says, Padavasya Vishwabhutani Tripadasya Amritam Divi. Not exactly, I'm taking that literally, but it says that there is the 4th level manifest leg of the divine, or 4th portion, which is visible to everybody as the world. But there are 3 layers underlying or above them, which is immortal and invisible. And very similar to this is what our lived reality is in many spheres in fact, every sphere of life. If you take the state, for instance, we know there is a policy, there is a law, there are so many things, there is a state machinery, all this, there is a lived reality, visible reality. This is only the 4th leg, which is visible to everybody. But what is causing it? And what is making this operate in this way? And that is the architecture of the state. It has an institutional structure. It has set goals for each institution. It has a set procedure for how each institution is supposed to work. That design, that architecture is underlying this manifest reality. And what is underlying that architecture? Underlying that architecture is a doctrine of statecraft. These are the goals of the state. Now, to fulfill these goals, you got to create these institutions. What kind of institutions are going to realize these purposes? And what is, in fact, underlying this doctrine itself? Where is the doctrine itself coming from? You have different doctrines of state. You have the modern state has its own doctrine. The Hindu state or the Dharmic state has its own doctrine. But where is this doctrine coming from? It is coming from a worldview, which is underlying all this. A view of world, a view of what the world is, a view of what man is, a view of what nature of man is, nature of human society is, a nature of functioning of human societies, and what are the purposes of man, what are the purposes that man craves for himself, knowingly or unknowingly. This theory or a worldview, as different societies understand, from this comes a doctrine for state. And these 4 levels, the worldview, the doctrine, the architecture or the institutional structure, then the lived reality. These 4 levels are going to be there pervasively in every sphere of life we see. You go to economy, you will find these 4 levels. You try to theorize how religions are, try to contrast Abrahamics versus the Dharmics or the Oriental or the Taoism, any religion. These 4 levels would be there. There is a lived reality of how people are behaving. There is an institutional structure. Then you have a doctrine that says this is the goal and things like that. And then there is a worldview underlying. This is the nature of man. This is the nature of the world. This is how the creation has come into existence. So these 4 levels, if we understand and stratify, and we'll need to understand where we actually have our activity carved out. Let us say you don't have a very clearly carved out doctrine of state. There is no way we are going to be able to architect our own state. And if we don't have our own worldview very clearly laid out, there is no way we are going to derive a doctrine for state. So we can see this in struggle in reality. We are unable to change our laws and things like that. We don't understand that changing these laws is not about having numbers in the parliament. It's about having the theory to be able to architect our own state, the theory to be able to define our own doctrine for state. So these are the things that we'll need to synthesize going forward. The same applies to, let us say, our town planning, our social order, our economy, our own political model, our own military, for that matter, our own nature of what we define as human rights, everything. There is nothing much theoretical basis on which they can act. At the hunch level, they think that, yes, we know we need to change these laws and things like that, but we just don't know where to go. That's my understanding, which is why all these theories are prevalent, right? It's more like the brown rule, brown by the white law, but because you don't have a theory of your own human rights, you don't have a framework within which you can say these are the human liberties. This is the way to understand human liberties. This is the way to understand how to protect human liberties, how to enable humans towards their fulfillment. Does tradition have a theory? Yes, it has. But do we have a framework synthesized based on that theory, which can replace the existing human rights framework? We don't have it. The theory needs to be developed. Reservations, again, it's like we have accepted the framework. And within that, there is a debate on whether there should be reservation, there should not be reservation to be. But have we questioned the fundamental assumption of, can state even define what is forward, backward? Can state even define a social order by itself? And this whole OCBC, SC, ST ladder is a state-defined birth-based caste order. Whether we like it or not, that is exactly what the Indian state has done. And worse, it has defined this ladder based on what British had defined in 1931. So we haven't done any homework whatsoever on defining how the state has to view Indian society in Indian light. There is no theory of what human fulfillment means, what privilege and disablement means. These are all the theories that are inherited from the British. And absence of it is where we are actually struggling. Today, everybody thinks that reservation is both good and bad. Of course, it has a very bad side effect. Maybe it has elevated some people's lives. But largely, it has also been exploited by powerful groups, materially powerful groups claiming their own victimhood. So whatever be it, good or bad, it has definitely not come from an informed view of what Indian society is, which is where our synthesis is absolutely required. And what happens to the current system after that, that is really secondary. If you have the right thing to do, then don't bother about what is wrong. Putting this to 4 levels is how the lived reality is, what are the different purposes that humans crave to fulfill. I mean, our Purusharthas or whatever. And how is the state to enable these things? That is one aspect. And how is the society to enable these things? These are social institutions end of the day. Unfortunately, the OCBC thing is a state-created social order, but we did not have a state-created social order. So society had defined its own units. And where are these units coming from? These different units have their own purposes defined, their own Purusharthas, their own equation with the society, their own bargaining power within the society, saying this is what we are going to get, this is what we are going to give. And this lived reality has at its basis a social order. You call it, it is a bit abstract, you call it Varna, whatever, but Varna is exactly not again a social structure imposition, right? Varna is a very abstract thing, as we have discussed in other places. But there is a relation, it's not fully unrelated. People are pursuing their purposes based on their innate nature, their cravings, and the society is to enable those through these institutions. And underlying these institutions would be a doctrine saying what our value set is. Do we enable human liberties? Do we curtail human liberties? Do we enable human purposes? Is everyone able to fulfill himself to the fullest? Is he having that freedom? Is he having access to resources? Or resources are not even provided and each person is working on his own? What exactly is our model? And this is what is going to come from the doctrine. And this is exactly what we would see in a Dharmic society. When we have prospered, obviously we were a very prosperous society. We had people fulfilling all different kinds of purposes. In the same society that had, the biggest share of world trade, the same society also had people just wearing their dhoti, sitting in an ashram, no riches, no material wealth, but they were the most respected people also, the rishis and those people. All these coexisted side by side with their own definitions of what they define as fulfillment in their own image. And that enablement is what was made possible with that social order. Now, are we today enabling people to realize their own purposes? And what is the institutional structure we require today towards such enablement without redefining what fulfillment is, which is where the real question is. Today's state is defining for me what my fulfillment should be, how I should define myself as forward or not. So once that goes, the doctrine, we have a native doctrine of enabling people according to their own lights, which again will have underlying worldview saying, this is the nature of man. The three gunas are there, all those things are there. That theory is there, right? You have the four varnas, three gunas. Is that actually imposing on society, saying, is the state assigning anything to anybody? Today it is. But in a Dharmic society, state does not assign, right? It is people who fulfill their Purusharthas. The society is enabled. Society is not scuttled by the state, which is how the Dharmic contrast would be to the current social order. But there is a view that Hindus can take care of themselves, defend their own religion. We don't need additional support and all that. I mean, the idea that Hindus practice their own religion and things will take care of themselves, which is not true, because as a lived reality, Hindus do have that belief, which is why you have so many people going to these Shaktipitas, Jyotirlingas, these Tirupatis, all these things. They absolutely have that conviction and belief, and they are practicing it. Their experience is a lived experience, and that is not denied, which is why they are practicing it. The problem is this belief is not taken into cognizance anywhere in the official system. Now, that is where we have the real problem. The state is an Abrahamic state. It is saying that you have a right to propagate, which is where the politicizing cults are able to expand the way they are able to expand. There is a definite lack of incentive from the state, in fact, counter incentive against people practicing the Indic faiths. So it's not as if we lack belief and that is why we are suffering. We have belief, that is why we are surviving in spite of all these state-created systems. Our education teaches us that what we are practicing is a superstition. Our education says that our practices are superstitious and people are there to reform us. Now, state itself thinks that it is a reformer of the system. So this is a space that we have lost. The public space has been lost to the enemies, to those people and those ideas that want to supplant the pagans or the Hinduism or whatever spiritual traditions we have. So to reclaim that space, there needs to be a separate or conscious activity. Our practicing our cultures or whatever we think, our ideas, our ways of life in our private sphere or in our individual lives is not going to reclaim that public space for us. That has to be done explicitly. There has to be a concerted effort to redefine how state views our society, to redefine our education, to reclaim that public space so that we can do these things explicitly. Why is there no state-sponsored town temple in every town? Why is there no state-sponsored temple everywhere in every village? And why is there not different activities of the town shaped around or positioned in their right places around these temples so that we have a divine town? Why are all our towns not divine towns as seen by the Indian state? This is a specific loss of public space that we had suffered and which we have to reclaim and ensure that the state, it's not enough if the state thinks that we have the freedom. It has not given us the freedom that it thinks it has given us. We have to make it realize, we have to re-articulate the state formulations, we have to re-articulate how the state sees us. That is when our real freedom is going to come.